Hey, bye, welcome back to another Let's Talk About Movies We Own, Stitch 1993, and with my wife, Shelby.
Hi.
And this is the part 4 of the comedy, the last part of the comedy. I swear, I know, seems like we've been talking forever about comedy films, but after today, after this video, we will go on to other genres. At the end of this video, I'll tell you what the next genre, although it's not really a genre, it's more like a collection, but we have enough movies that it needs its own little section. But going back, so we got our last little bit of comedies. I think we got, about 15 movies to talk about. So I'm actually going to let Shelby start this one off. And if you haven't been here before, welcome. As I said, it's just me and my wife talking about our over 1,200 movies we own physically on DVD and Blu-ray. We may eventually get around to talking about our VHS videos, but I tend to keep those for the VHS pile, so check those out if you want to hear more discussion about VHS movies and shows. So take it away, Shelby.
Okay, so our first movie today is Our Idiot Brother. It's definitely more of a me movie. It is a family dramedy. I really enjoyed the sibling dynamic in it because it's kind of the reverse of me and my siblings. It's three sisters and one brother. We're three brothers and one sister. But Paul Rudd is kind of playing almost a typical Paul Rudd character. He's chill, he's laid back, he's a little bit more free spirited, and all three of his sisters have to constantly bail him out of his own life and don't really see how he survives and the way he does. They're all kind of, I wouldn't say like super rigid. There is like a lot of rigidity to them, but they all just kind of fit like their own little stereotype. And he kind of helps break them out of that as the movie progresses. And it's a cute watch. It's definitely one of those. It could be considered a one and done movie. It's not one that you're necessarily going to see yourself going back to over and over again unless this is just really your jam, but it's really cute.
And I don't have much to say about this because I have never seen this movie before. I will say I did check out the trailer, so it is, and it's got a stat cast. So on top of Paul Rudd being in there, we also have Elizabeth Banks, Adam Scott, Rashida Jones, and Zoe Deschanel just to round out the cast, as well as others. Also, people like Sterling K. Brown show up, so I think this may have been one of his earlier roles because he only plays a minor part in it as the parole officer. And I only know that because that's the trailer. I haven't seen the movie. So I actually don't have any thoughts other than really interesting cast. So the next movie that we're going to is The Producers. Now, this is the Mel Brooks just straight up comedy version. We'll get to the musical version later. This is the one with Gene Wilder and Zero Mostel. And coming from somebody that has seen both and does enjoy both of them equally, I do say the original is probably the best version of the film, the 1967 version. So if you've never heard of the story, The Producers is about this really washed out producer that is just, has never had a successful stage Broadway musical, and Gene Wilder comes along and he's like looking at all his scripts and his financials because he's trying to help him with money, and he's noticing that with the movies that bomb, he actually is making some money back because people are refunding their tickets. So basically they come to the conclusion that they can actually make more money with something that does horrible at the box office than an actual success, because with a success then you have to pay taxes and stuff, whereas if it's not a success then actually it's more counted as like a deduction, so you actually get to keep more money. So they go out of their way to find the worst script, the worst actors, the worst songwriter, basically the worst ever, to make the worst musical to ever be seen. And it's just lovely seeing Gene Wilder. He's kind of play a more I say he does play unhinged a lot, but this is more like childlike unhinged, whereas his other films he's more adult unhinged there. And then Zero Mostel, I want to say outside of the Muppet Show, this is like the only movie I've seen Zero in, so I'm not sure based on his other characters whether this is more in line with this type of comedy or this is him playing against the grain. But definitely a great comedy to check out either way. Shelby, your thoughts?
So I do agree with you on some parts. I do still prefer the musical, but I usually prefer the musical version of things. With the exception being Gene Wilder versus Matthew Broderick. Gene Wilder kills it in this. There's the energy feels more in tune with how the character's supposed to be. I wouldn't necessarily say it's childlike unhinged. I would say it's that verging on a constant anxiety attack.
Yeah.
Which is also how the character is supposed to be, which you don't really get that properly in the musical version. But on the flip side of that, when you have Zero Mostel, who is great in this, he is really great in this movie, versus Nathan Lane in the musical, it's going to be Nathan Lane every time. So I feel like if you could somehow combine both of them, you'd get the perfect movie.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it's great. It's fun. Do keep in mind that a lot of the stuff with the musical they're trying to create is meant to offend.
Yes.
So don't get offended thinking they're trying to,
as I said, they're trying to
support something.
Yeah, they're not trying to support anything. We're not going to spoil it if you've never seen it, but it is. They're going out of their way to make sure it is offensive so that it doesn't make money. So going on to the next film, we've got The Philadelphia Story, which I hadn't seen until just recently. It is starring Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, and James Stewart. All three are great classical actors, actresses in their own right. I only saw this movie, I think, 1 or 2 years ago, so I don't have any nostalgia for it. But I do have issues with the film, and I do understand that this is, this came out literally in 1940, so this is, times have changed with some of this stuff. But it is about Katharine Hepburn's character has divorced Cary Grant's character, and it sounds like they've had a messy relationship since before they were even married to begin with, so it was just going to end up in divorce. And she ends up having to, be at this wedding and meets up with James Stewart, and they seem to actually hit it off pretty well, and you think they're actually going to end up, but no, she in the end of the movie, she literally goes back and gets remarried to Cary Grant, even though throughout the whole entire film they show how these two characters do not live well with each other, do not play well with each other. They just, every time they're in the same room together, one has to go off the other, but all of a sudden in the last scene of the movie they're just like, oh, you know what, I do love you. I'm sorry, it's crap. It's great acting. If you want to see these three at like the top of their game, this is probably one of the films. I think this is like one of the only films where all three are in it together. So if you want to see all of them playing off each other, it's really cool because it's Cary Grant and James Stewart and Katharine Hepburn. But other than that, I can't recommend this movie to be a good movie. It's just a classic movie. But even then, I'm like, there's better movies from this time era. There's better films all these actors have been in. Your thoughts?
Okay, so I really do enjoy this one because I love a good messy plot. It is really messy. So this is definitely more of a me movie. And I think part of the reason I enjoyed this so much is because growing up, we had Sweet Home Alabama, and Sweet Home Alabama is basically Honky Tonk Philadelphia Story. It's almost the same plot. And it's definitely the same relationship dynamics. So, again, like you said, this is pretty much everybody at the top of their game. They're fantastic in this movie. I did really feel myself rooting for James Stewart in the whole way through this movie. I was disappointed that she ends up with Grant's character. But at the same time, it came out in 1940. The previously established couple almost always ends up together. It doesn't necessarily make it a good thing, but it's a predictable thing. And I do think this movie was a blueprint for a lot of the rom-coms we would get later on.
All right, so next is Risky Business, starring Tom Cruise. You know, I've seen this movie. I remember this movie. I just don't have a lot to say about this movie. It's fine. I mean, it has, you know, the iconic him in his underwear and the white t-shirt, or white button-up shirt, sliding across the floor to, you know, Billy Joel song, or
I don't remember who did the song.
But, you know, Old Time Rock and Roll. That's the song. And, you know, it's about him. He's at the house alone while his parents are out of town, and decides to hire a hooker, or befriend a hooker or something like that.
Yeah, there is a...
Somehow a hooker gets involved, and then it ends up and by the end of it, they actually, like, I don't know, are in love, whatever. But I don't really have... I mean, it's not a bad film. It's just... I don't know. Is I guess your typical 80s comedy film? I don't know. You got probably better thoughts on this, because I think you were the one that had this movie.
It is one of the ones that I brought in to the house. You have to remember while watching it came out in 83. So it is a whole different list of sensibilities, whole different list of social norms. It's literally 40 years old now. So I do give movies that are significantly older than what we are now a little bit of a grace, because they did have such different standards than we do now. It is fun. It's messy. And it is that typical... It's a play on the typical teen Home Alone story where, you know, they throw the big rager, they mess up the house, a whole bunch of stuff goes wrong, and they have to get it put back together before the parents get home. It just happens to also have a hooker.
All right. School Rock. So this is a classic film starring Jack Black and, like, a whole bunch of kids that would eventually go on to do bigger and better things, including Miranda Cosgrove. But it just has a stacked cast in general, because we got Sarah Silverman, Joan Cusack, Adam Pascal, and again, all the kids. Most of them would go on to other films and television shows, and basically are, you know, what we would see on television growing up in our tweens and teens on Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network and Disney. But I really don't have a lot to say. I mean, it's a classic film by today's standards. You know, Jack Black, with every film he's been in, he just puts his 110% in to it, and has you see him having a blast with it, especially basically giving his knowledge of rock and roll to all these middle schoolers. And and it seems like all the kids are having a real blast learning about it and learning about instruments or singing, and it just plays out so well. I don't have a lot more to say on that not everybody else has said about it. I'm sure you've got your own thoughts on it.
I do. So I do agree with you. This is a great movie. I love this movie. This is the movie that made me love Jack Black. With the exception of some of his movies, if I hear he's in it, I'm going to go see it. I don't care. This was my introduction to Miranda Cosgrove. I really enjoyed her in this. This movie made me want to be a choir kid, and I stuck with that all the way through middle school and high school. But he wasn't the reason I picked this movie to watch in the first place when I did notice it. It's because it had Joan Cusack in it, and I love the Cusacks. So I got really excited that Joan Cusack was in it. And it was also my first introduction to Adam Pascal, which we will get more into him when we get to the musicals section, because he is in one of my favorite musicals of all time. The movie is just great. The cast is fantastic. Because the movie was such a big hit, it got turned into a stage show, and the stage show is a huge hit, and it gets done by schools all over the country. Just everything associated with this movie that I know of is fantastic. It is top tier. It's gold. I love this movie.
16 Candles. Man, this movie hasn't aged well. I'm trying to think of something nice to say about it. I mean, Molly Ringwald is good. I mean, she's good in all her films from that era. I can't recommend this movie. I mean, if you're going for a John Hughes night and you want to watch all his films, you gotta watch this one. But other than that, there's better John Hughes movies and better Molly Ringwald movies. Yeah, you got anything?
I do agree it has not aged well at all, but I will always have a soft spot for this movie because of Molly Ringwald and the fact that it's John Hughes. I got introduced to John Hughes maybe a little too early in my life, but I love this movie. Mostly for nostalgia's sake. There are a lot of things in this movie that do not hold up.
Oh, they do not age
Not
well.
at
They
all.
don't even age well for their time, honestly. I think I remember reading something that this, even though it was successful, there were some critics that were like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the, and like even by like 5 year, maybe a decade later, some of those jokes were not doing well.
No.
So yeah.
But what I will say for it is at some point in every teen's life, they have that moment where they feel like literally nobody sees them. They don't matter. Their family just doesn't care. And it's usually at a time where there's a lot going on and you're just feeling like the forgotten child, the forgotten sibling. So I could definitely relate to that portion of the story heavily.
Yeah, I feel like same with the Philadelphia story. This was a blueprint for a lot. I mean, most John Hughes movies were blueprints for basically every teen movie that would come out between after this and nowadays. But I mean, the story is basically it is Molly Ringwald's character's birthday. However, the whole family is trying to get everything done for her older sister's wedding. And so they literally forget that is her birthday. And so, hijinks happen and racial stereotypes happen. And other stuff. And we end up with that scene that so many films have and television shows have parodied, which is her and I even forget his name.
The character's name is Jake.
Michael Schofling, sitting at the window in the dark with the candle, with the birthday cake, and she's like, make a wish, and it's that cheesy. I mean, that scene's okay, but I'm like, a lot of better shows and movies would use that trope in a much better way there. So moving on. Ooh, Spaceballs. Okay, Mel Brooks's parody on Star Wars and just space movies in general, because we also get stuff to Alien, a little bit, and just barely, but some little winks and hints to Star Trek, but mainly it's basically the entire Star Wars trilogy, I believe, being parodied. Great cast. We got Rick Moranis as Dark Helmet and John Candy as Barf, but then we also have Mel Brooks, who's basically he plays two characters. He plays the Yoda character, Yogurt, and then he also is the president, who's basically supposed to be the Emperor, Palpatine. And then you've got just that type of humor there, which it has really held up through the decades. Honestly, I really can't say much about that, but if you enjoy Star Wars, or even if you don't, this is fun movie that makes fun of it, and as well as pays homage to other sci-fi tropes of the time. there. And honestly, it's great practical effects. I think this is the most practical effects and visual effects Mel Brooks movie has. So they really went all out. I think they even, I'm not sure if I might be remembering this wrong, but I believe they even got some people from George Lucas's team, ILM, Industrial Lights and Magic, to help with some of the props, I think, because George was okay with them parodying the movie just as long as he never made action figures of it, because he didn't want kids being confused between the parody and the actual action figures, which is where the real money is made. Which, I mean, and honestly makes sense. So, your thoughts on this?
So I love this movie. I think this might have been my first Bill Pullman movie, and I really enjoyed him in this.
No, I think it might be mine as well.
It's like this and While You Were Sleeping I saw at very early ages. I might lose some people here, but I like this more than the entirety of Star Wars. All of it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna lose some people. I'm gonna lose some people. To be fair, I didn't really grow up with Star Wars. I kind of went really hard into everyone in my house is into it, so I'm gonna not. But I really did enjoy Spaceballs. I think just like in the original trilogy with Leia, Vespa's my favorite. It was so fun and so enjoyable, and it's John Candy. If you like anything with John Candy in it, you're really gonna enjoy this. He's adorable in it. And
I gotta say, I love that they got John Hurt to just play his character from Alien. They could have gotten anybody to just do look-alike, but they're like, no, let's just ask if he wants to come back and just do that scene again, and make it basically better, in my opinion.
And then he was down for it. He was like, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, sure, why not?
But it's all around. It's Mel Brooks. It's great. If you enjoy Mel Brooks movies, you're gonna like this. Even if you don't really enjoy Mel Brooks movies, this is more of like your starter for his type of comedy.
If anybody's been watching these films, watching these videos, and we keep bringing up Mel Brooks, he basically did a parody of every single genre known. He did horror, western. This would be his space one. Producers was his musical one. To a degree, he also would parody ones we don't have, which is like High Anxiety is the Alfred Hitchcock one. He did. He eventually in the 90s. He started doing stuff in the 60s and 70s, but he kept on doing them through the 90s and 2000s. So like Robin Hood Men in Tights, which we don't have a copy of, but that was his, take on the Robin Hood, and just type of fantasy genre in general. So it's and we both just love that type of sense of humor where it's a lot of visual and sight gags, but there's some slapstick in it. And yeah, I agree with you. If you've never been introduced to Mel Brooks or never seen any of Mel Brooks ones, Spaceballs is probably the first movie to check out, and then Young Frankenstein is probably the second one to check out. Or you can flip between those two. But basically, those are his best films there.
I'd also like to say I love how he does snarky characters, because I am a sucker for a snarky character, and he's a master
every single
at
one
it.
of his characters is snarky in their own right.
He's a master at it, and I love that.
All right, so the next one is This Is Spinal Tap. I think there were some movies before this one, but this is mainly what made the mockumentary its thing. Like, we honestly probably wouldn't get stuff like Never Stop, Never Stopping, and other films in that vein if This Is Spinal Tap had not happened. For those who are not familiar with This Is Spinal Tap, it is a mockumentary, which is it means it is a fake documentary about this rock and roll hair band during the 80s when that was popular, and they are just like the worst rock and roll British hair band. And it's Rob Reiner, who is also the director, the actual director, but he's also the director in the mockumentary. Just following along them and just seeing this whole band just get into worse and worse situations. But then it's really interesting because this is like got some really big names before they were really big names. So you've got you've got Dana Carvey as a mime waiter, and you got and Billy Crystal back before they were big names, and you've even got what's her name, Angelica Houston, and the girl from The Nanny in here. And this is before their shows and everything. I think Angelica Houston was starting to get popular, but still, great cast. And this is the Fran Drescher. That's her name for the nanny character. And this is where the movie where we get the going up to 11 on the the volume is that's where this comes in. Your thoughts?
I had so much fun watching this. I remember it being referenced a lot in high school, especially with the kids that were in like band and chorus. Because of this one goes up to 11, I remember our chorus teacher used that specific line to tell us to be louder. It's just so much fun. It's really enjoyable. You get a chance to just really lose yourself in it. There are moments you have to remind yourself, this is fake. This didn't happen. This isn't real. But they are taking inspiration from a lot of the big bands at the time where a lot of the stuff in the movie was happening with other groups.
Yeah. And it's funny because if you go online and like watch trailers or watch other reviews, there have been band members from the 80s and even going on where it's like, they parodied that in this film, but that actually happened when I was with this band or something similar happened. So it's not too far off. It's just kind of put up to 11 of the hilarity of it. Whereas like they're one part of the film, they're behind stage and they're stuck lost in like the maze of hallways and everything, trying to get up to the stage, and every time they get to a door it just keeps going on. And I remember seeing somebody say that years ago, that you think that's funny, but that actually happened one time because the venue was so big that they took a wrong turn and they were just kind of lost for a couple minutes there. But definitely check this one out. So I'm going to let you start with this one.
So the next one is This Is Where I Leave You, and it's kind of my favorite blend of drama and comedy, because there are some really great comedic moments between the cast in this, but the whole thing centers around, I believe it was the father dying.
Yes.
And they're having to hold the funeral. I believe the family's Jewish, because I think they're having to sit Shiva, because I remember at some point everybody's sitting on the floor.
Yeah, they're having to be there for basically like 7 days.
Yes, that's what it is.
Or something. And it's basically they've all kind of fallen out with each other, so none of them really know what the others are doing in their life.
It's not, and it doesn't seem like it was a big argument that caused a rift. It was just a case of, when there's too many siblings in a family, everyone's going to drift apart when they get to become adults, because you don't really get a chance to connect these days like they did back when everybody just lived in their hometown forever.
Right.
So all the siblings have drifted apart from each other. There's issues in each of their own personal lives. And you get to see the different sibling archetypes in each of them. Like, each one has their own thing going on. They kind of follow, like, the birth order rule that's in there. That's mentioned a lot. And you're mostly following Jason Bateman's character. I believe he's supposed to be kind of in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's supposed to be like the middle child. So he gets to deal with the things going on with his sister, the things going on with his brothers. I think one of them's struggling with fertility. One of the other ones is Adam Driver, and I believe he's the baby, so he's wild and crazy. And if you've ever seen just really Adam Driver in almost anything but Star Wars, it's a lot of that type of personality. It has a lot of heart to it. Like, I wouldn't say it's a fun watch, but it is kind of it's a relatable watch, especially as you get older.
It's a dramedy, but it's leaning more harder on the comedy side, so that's why it's in the comedy section. But it definitely does have those dramatic beats throughout it. And this was one kind of like a couple where you really wanted to see it, but we didn't see it. And I think this was more of, we just got too busy because this came out when a lot of films were coming out, and it just kind of went under our radar eventually. But
this was 2014. We were also broke.
True, be fair, yeah. So by the time we finally got around to it, we both highly enjoyed it, and that's why we own it. The cast is stacked. Shelby already mentioned Jason Bateman and Adam Driver are in there, but there's also Tina Fey, Jane Fonda, Rose Byrne, Corey Stoll, Catherine Hahn, Timothy Olyphant, Dax Shepard, and Ben Schwartz, just to name a few. And there's more than that in there because more people just kind of show up because, it's a funeral and you're inviting people to the funeral and to the house. So you've got more guest stars and stuff in there. But, yeah, and of course, everybody's, that's basically all mainly comedy actors or drama actors. So they're really on top of their A game with the script and playing off each other really well, I think. But yeah, really, really good one.
And everyone gets their moment to shine in it.
They do, yes.
Like, even though you're following Jason Bateman's character the most, you really get a moment with everyone, and you really get a sense of who that person's supposed to be. And I like when a movie's able to do that without it necessarily being an ensemble piece.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right. Next is Tropic Thunder. This is another one where it's just so many people have said their thoughts about it. So, I mean, not much more to say other than it's a really good comedy starring Robert Downey Jr., Jack Black, and Brandon Jackson on top of, Ben Stiller and Tom Cruise showing up in there and other people. Later on, Steve Coogan's really good in this for the little bit of time that he is in the film. I feel like this, I think both you and I agree, this is our favorite Tom Cruise movie. No?
Not for me.
Oh.
It is close, but my favorite is definitely an unpopular choice.
Oh, okay. So, but yeah, it if you've never seen the movie, it is about these actors going into a jungle to film another film, and they realize that they are actually in an actual jungle, and the enemies are actually I think gorillas or something like that, or they're basically in an actual war zone, but they don't ever realize that, and so they just keep going, like they think the cameras are everywhere, and they're just continuously acting without a script. Robert Downey Jr. does do blackface. This did come out in 2008, so that wasn't...
it was still considered wrong. It was RDJ, so he got a pass.
So he got a pass. I don't know if that would happen today, but who knows? Because it was, as you said, it was 2008. We are already kind of looking at that saying, we probably shouldn't do that, but it's Robert Downey Jr. He was coming fresh off Iron Man. But, yeah, hilarious film. Your thoughts?
So I do agree with everything you said. This is one of the few Ben Stiller movies I like. I usually don't like Ben Stiller. We've had this discussion when it comes to Zoolander. It's part of the reason why we don't have a Zoolander.
Yeah.
But it's like this, and the first two Meet the Parents movies. That's it. That's the only Ben Stiller movies I like. Robert Downey Jr., I would watch pretty much anything with him in it. I love him. It's another Jack Black moment that I love. I haven't really seen much with Brandon T. Jackson, but he was enjoyable in this. Okay, this one's all Ben. I have nothing to say other than this was a mess and it was not my style.
It's UHF. It's Weird Al's movie. I love it. So yeah, and it's Weird Al Yankovic plays George Newman, who basically he wants to be in television, and he first tries to go to an actual television station, but the stations are like, yeah, you're weird, of course. We don't get your comedy. You're not going to be good in the ratings, so he doesn't get to be in television. He eventually finds out that I believe he inherits this tiny little television station, a UHF station, and he basically is free reign to do whatever he wants with this television station. So he gets to do all his weird shows, and there's weird commercials on top of that, and it ends up being really popular and doing really well with the ratings that the president of, which is Kevin McCarthy, of the actual radio station, tries to basically shut him down and fails. But throughout that, we've got Weird Al being basically himself in a way. We also got Michael Richards in here. Fran Drescher shows up again in here as a bigger part than in This Is Spinal Tap. And they're all great. Of course, they're all comedic actors on top of that. And so you also get a couple of music videos for Weird Al's songs in there. I believe one of them is about the Beverly Hillbillies. Yeah, so it's a great film. The reason why it didn't do so well at the box office is it came out in 1989, so it came out the same weekend as Tim Burton's Batman, and it just got pulverized, and so now it's kind of gotten a cult following, but it is, if you like Weird Al, definitely check this one out. Alright, so Uncle Buck. This is one of the better John Hughes movies. This is also, so without Uncle Buck, we wouldn't get Home Alone, because this is where Macaulay Culkin, this was his first big role, and this is, John Hughes saw him acting in this and like, I like this kid, he's got some good acting chops, I'm going to write a whole movie for him, and wrote Home Alone. Of course, we also got John Candy as the titular Uncle Buck, who is basically he's not he does have a job, but he's just more of kind of a really relaxed uncle, and so what happens is the parents have to go out of town, and literally nobody else is available except for Uncle Buck. So he is the one to take care of two little kids plus a teenager, and it is just him being John Candy, being his self basically, and being an uncle to some pretty interesting kids. Of course, Macaulay Culkin is basically like a little adult kind of, and then we've got Gabby Hoffman as the really cute, really tiny little sister, and Jane Louisa Kelly is the older sister who's dating, like, she's in high school, so she's dating the bad boy, and John Candy just, slowly kind of gets her to figure out, hey, probably shouldn't be doing that or hanging out with these type of people in general. And it's overall just a really heartfelt film, because he never does anything mean-spirited to the kids. He's always trying to, try to raise them as best as if they were his own kids there. And by the end, they all really, really love him. Your thoughts on this?
So not only do I love this movie, I think it's the John Hughes movie that's aged the best.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Even over Home Alone. I would pick this over Home Alone any day. Not that there's anything against Home Alone. This is just better. I do agree with everything you said. I would add for Macaulay Culkin, it's not only is it his usual where he plays like a little adult, but the age he's supposed to be is usually when kids try to not be kids.
Right.
They're trying to be grown-ups. They want to be adults. They want to, do everything adults can do, so they're trying to act more mature, when really what they want to do is take Nerf guns in the backyard and start shooting at each other. Yeah. But he did that so well. It was so adorable. John Candy is so good in this. I love the relationship with everybody. It's really well put together.
Mm-hmm. All right, Wayne's World. So classic Mike Myers, Dana Carvey movie. We only own the first one because I just haven't gotten around to owning two. I thoroughly enjoy this. I mean, we got the classic Bohemian Rhapsody scene out of this, and apparently Freddie was still he was, I think he passed away in 1992, but he did hear about it. He might have, I don't remember, but he might have been able to see like an early showing of that scene, and he approved it. So I was but on top of that, it's just it is based off the SNL skits of this with the same characters, and it's just basically them riding around in a car, meeting up with Tia Carrere's character, who is in a band, and basically it's one skit after another of Mike Myers and or Dana Carvey just being their weird selves. And we've got Rob Lowe, just back when Rob Lowe was just playing the sleaziest bad guys ever, which is so funny because nowadays you see him in stuff like Parks and Rec, and you're just like, really? You used to play villains? Yes, he played villains all the time, and he was really good at it, and he's really good in this one. Your thoughts?
So the only scene I really like in this movie is the Bohemian Rhapsody scene. Everything else in it, it's either too downplayed or too over the top. Like, there's not a good middle ground in it for me. I'm not a huge Dana Carvey fan, so I think that might have been part of it. I'm just not a huge fan of his, even though I love Mike Myers. I'm not a huge fan of Dana Carvey.
All right. We got Weirdo. So Weirdo is just a stand-up comedy with Donald Glover. And if you don't know who Donald Glover is, he's also goes by Childish Gambino, but he mainly outside of Childish Gambino, I think the only thing his big acting has been in is
he did Community and Atlanta.
Neither show I really got into, but I really do like his stand-up comedy. He is a millennial, so it's a lot of millennial type of humor, and a lot of the stuff that he had to deal with growing up, both of us really personally could relate to. So it's a lot of relatable humor for us, at least. To each their own on that type of humor and stuff there. But yeah, it's probably one of my favorite stand-up specials. I really would like for him to do another one. I know he kind of did that in between him doing everything else. So I would love for him to do another one. Your thoughts? Because you introduced this to me.
I did. So,
you want to tell the story?
I do want to tell the story.
Okay.
So when we first started talking, before we even actually met, like face to face, I wanted to make sure he would understand my sense of humor and would get along with my sense of humor. So I sent him a link to the special and asked him what he thought of it, knowing that if he didn't enjoy it, there was no way we were going to work. No way at all. And he's just messaging me back the whole way through it, just in hysterics. I'm just like, good, this is gonna work. So I partially credit Weirdo for our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the stand-up so much. I wholeheartedly believe if we didn't have the stand-up, we would not have his cameos in the MCU and in across the Spider-Verse.
Right.
So he has a whole bit in there about Spider-Man, and it's I'm not going to go into detail because it's a lot funnier when he says it, because he is a professional. I am not.
It's even funnier in hindsight because this is before he got signed on to be in either of those two films. So it's kind of, I guess, even funnier now because you're like, you would be in the Spider-Man films, just not Spider-Man, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. But we also might not have gotten a chance to introduce Miles if he hadn't, brought this up to begin with.
Yeah.
He's fantastic the whole way through this. There's so many great moments in it that will have you in stitches if you like the millennial kind of humor. If you're not into the millennial kind of humor, you're going to be offended.
Offended or just not get it at all or not really understand it. And it just, and it's not just specifically for millennials. It's just, he is that's almost the same age as us. So a lot of his topics that he touches on is stuff that happened to me and Shelby in one way, shape, or form. In family and going to certain locations, growing up and family members. And all that. Not saying that people younger or older didn't deal with that. That just, it seemed to be more prevalent with our generation for some reason.
But yeah, part of that might be because a lot of our generation's parents didn't want to leave us at home because when they were growing up, kids were getting snatched off the street all the time. Yeah. So we were getting tricked into going on errands by saying, we'll go to the store, we'll go to the toy store after this, or we'll go get ice cream after this, and we spend 6 hours in Home Depot.
Or Lowe's.
And that is brought up in the special.
Yes. Going back to our regular movies, we got two more. And these, honestly, are both classics. So we've got Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein, which is the classic Mel Brooks film. As I said earlier, if you are never been introduced to Mel Brooks movies, start off with either Spaceballs or this film, because if you don't like either one of these, you probably aren't going to like the rest of his films. This, of course, has come back with Gene Wilder. We also got Marty Feldman as Igor. We got Madeline Kahn, and we got Peter Boyle as the monster. And Peter Boyle's mostly known for as the grandpa on Everybody Loves Raymond. We also have Cloris Leachman as Frau Blucher, and got a whole bunch of other actors that were just kind of either getting down and retiring or hadn't been big names yet. So this was like their first big film. Also, Tara Garr's in this as Inga, and she's great as well. And Kenneth Mars as the inspector is hilarious. Great quotable lines throughout the whole film. We get the putting on the Ritz scene, which I don't know how popular that song was before this movie, but it definitely probably made it even more popular afterwards, and probably why it's still known to today. You can watch this without having knowledge of the other Frankenstein films, the classic Universal Frankenstein films, but I would say it does make it funnier if you've seen at least Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, because those are the main two riffs. Interesting fact that I'm sure probably a lot of people know that have seen this film more than once is back when Mel Brooks was getting production and stuff and was having to recreate the laboratory, somebody said, hey, I actually own all the set pieces from the original Frankenstein film. You can just reuse them. So he was able to use the same set pieces that were in the original Frankenstein film for Young Frankenstein, which gives it just another little extra oomph of, even though it's a parody film, giving it more authenticity, honestly. And it's filmed in black and white, and this is 1974, so everything was in color. But Mel Brooks was head on with making sure that this was as authentic as possible to the Universal Studios Frankenstein film, which meant it is in black and white, even though for some odd reason, anytime you pick up the DVD or Blu-ray, the cover is going to be in color. There's never a color version of this film, as far as I'm aware of. Your thoughts on this, because I know this was also a big movie for you.
So I love everything about this movie. This is Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder at their absolute best. Madeline Kahn is hilarious in this. Cloris Leachman had me in stitches every time she pops up on screen. It's just so good. I may have done a bad thing and introduced this to a 2-year-old, but he thought it was funny. He didn't have any issues.
I honestly, this is one of those movies for all ages. Yeah, it's got some adult humor in it, but those type of jokes are really going to go over a lot of kids' heads for the most part, and it's not anything too lewd or outrageous. It's very much just, if you're young, you're more going to laugh at the slapstick and the over expressionist, especially out of Gene Wilder, and Marty Feldman. But I mean, it's not until you'll get into like middle school, high school, you're really going to get most of those other jokes in there. So I think this would be great. I mean, I honestly don't see a problem introducing this to a 2-year-old.
See, if they're too young to properly ask questions, you're probably fine. If they're old enough to start asking questions, but not old enough to get the answers, maybe don't. Because when I showed it to the 2-year-old, it became one of his favorite movies, and I think it might have shaped his sense of humor now as a 15-year-old. It's so much fun. I think my favorite part of the whole movie is Marty Feldman. It's everything you want out of a sidekick character. Yeah. He plays off of Gene Wilder so well. It allows Gene Wilder to just be the straight man pretty much the whole way through, and Marty gets to be kooky and crazy and just super entertaining, and it's so much fun.
Mm-hmm. And our last film is Zombieland. So interesting. I was interesting tidbit. I was able to see this in theaters. I know that kind of dates me. Probably a lot of you watching this watch this in theaters, but if you haven't, it was a great experience in theaters. This was, when this came out, this was at the peak of zombie movies. Like, there was a lot of zombie movies coming around this time. And so it was popular just because it was another zombie movie, but it got probably even more popular because it was a comedy zombie movie, which we don't really see a lot of. Of course, nowadays we get a lot of comedy horror films, but even in the 2000s, we were not getting a lot of comedy horror movies. So it takes place in a zombie apocalypse. We've got Jesse Eisenberg as the main character. He meets up with Woody Harrelson and Emma Stone and Abigail Breslin, and they're all just trying to basically get to what is supposedly a safe location. And they're just, along the way, you've got Jesse semi-narrating it because he has this whole rules of how
to survive Zombieland.
How to survive, basically, survival guide. And so you've got the rules of, like, make sure to check the back seat, double tap,
cardio,
and so much more. And yeah, and of course, this I think this was my first introduction to Emma Stone's. I believe. Same with Woody Harrelson. Abigail Breslin, I've seen her in other stuff before. And she was Little Miss Sunshine, and of course we get Bill Murray as a cameo playing himself. So yeah, great experience, great fun movie. And your thoughts?
So this movie holds a special place for me. This movie was watched at my house the first time the first guy I dated met the entire motley crew of my family.
It was not me.
It was not him.
Nope.
It was a guy I dated senior year. It was his movie. He brought it over, so none of us had seen it until that moment. And right at the end of it, he's just kind of sit there casually watching it. Me and all three of my brothers start really paying close attention right at that last scene, last few scenes, right at the theme park, because we're starting to notice something. We've been there. It's Wild Adventures in Valdosta, Georgia.
Yep.
So we got really excited, and the dude I'm dating couldn't figure out why we're excited. We're like, we were just there last summer! So we're pointing out all the little rides, and it did take us out of the movie, but it's only because we had gone there a lot. But it was kind of the start for me of being able to recognize landmarks I'd been to in movies, because it was kind of right around the start of movies really being filmed in Georgia. So yeah, it was a lot of fun watching this movie. That part of it holds a special place for me. I find myself quoting this movie like at least once a week, especially in the grocery store. Which, if you've seen the movie, you probably know the things I'm referring to. Even if I'm not looking for Twinkies, if I'm trying to focus on looking for something specifically, my brain will just start chanting Twinkies.
And that's it for the comedy films. I know there's a lot of films that we just don't own yet. So definitely, shout out in the comments what you think movies we should either check out or buy, because we may have watched it, we just don't have it on DVD yet. And what were some of your favorite comedy films, either ones we mentioned or ones we haven't mentioned yet? Alright, so next month it's going to be a shorter video because we're going to go over our Criterion collection of DVDs. Now I'll get more into what a Criterion movie is, if you don't know what that is, next month, so make sure to subscribe for the future movies. As I said, it's going to be shorter because we don't have a lot of Criterion movies compared to any of the other genres after that. And of course, at the end of that video, then I'll say what the next 5 or 10 videos are going to be, because the next one after that is a lot. And but it's been asked by a lot of people in the comments, like, when are you going to talk about this film and this film? I'm like, just wait. So stay tuned to next month, and thank you and have a good day.
Also, take a moment in the comments. Try and see if you can figure out what that following section is going to be.
I will. If you guess it right, I'm not going to tell you. You're just going to have to wait.
Talk to y'all next month.
Bye.